more minutes to allow folks to log in. And we did just identify that the meeting is being recorded, so I think you need to click "Got it" on that message in order to continue and to be able to see Corey's presentation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Peg Tazwell. I'm the Executive Director of Knox County Head Start and a member of the Licking Knox Trauma-Informed Care Leadership Committee. We would like to welcome everyone to this fourth session of our six-part Trauma-Informed Care Lunch and Learn series. Today's session is Collaboration, Voice and Choice, Social Connections. We'll get started right now, and we only have a half hour for the presentation, followed by an optional 15 minutes of questions and answers with our presenter. Please do complete the evaluation at the end of the session to let us know how we're doing and if there's additional information or training you would like. While we are unable to offer CEUs due to the short length of each session, we will offer a certificate of attendance for those who are interested. Please include your name on the evaluation in order to receive that. These sessions are being recorded for those who could not join us today. We will also offer resource information, handouts, and PowerPoints to attendees. We hope you enjoy and benefit from this session today. I'd like to thank the committee for putting the series together and welcome our presenter, Corey Stutz, who will introduce himself.
Thanks, Peg. Thanks everyone for joining today. As Peg said, my name is Corey Stutz. I am the Community Impact Director at United Way of Licking County, and I'm also a member of the Trauma-Informed Care Leadership Committee for Knox and Licking County. So it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited to talk about this topic. The last three sessions have been wonderful, and even though I'm a member of the committee, I have learned so much from the other presenters. So I really want to thank them for the work that they did. The last three presentations have really done a great job of laying the groundwork of identifying what is trauma, how does trauma present itself, what are some ways that people with trauma are able to be treated, are able to heal from their trauma. And so we're going to shift focus in this presentation to looking at
Licking County Coalition for Housing. How can I help you?
Some of those aspects of trauma-informed care specifically. So we're going to talk about collaboration, voice and choice, and social connections today. So first of all, as I said, we've talked a lot about what is trauma so far in these sessions. And so I wanted to give a little bit of information about what specifically is trauma-informed care. So as you can see, trauma-informed care is a practice that promotes a culture of safety, empowerment, and healing. To be trauma-informed means that an agency realizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths for recovery. that it recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others involved with the system, and responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, and actively seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. Those words in bold sometimes are referred to as the 4 R's of trauma-informed care. And it originated really as a way for practitioners, if they are therapists or someone who is providing a service to an individual in a mental health setting, to be aware of trauma. But it really has been expanded to a variety of applying it to every workplace. So I really want to take the perspective of relating these aspects of trauma-informed care to our everyday lives in our workplaces. Most of us, I assume, are going to whether it's an office or work from home, we're engaging with clients, coworkers, we might have staff that are report to us. So there are a variety of ways that we can use this information to bring this awareness, make our workplace or our home life or wherever is applicable trauma informed. So it's just a really very beneficial way to as you see on the screen, to recognize that trauma is present. So many of us deal with trauma in some capacity, whether it is to the point of having a trauma disorder or just something that we have experienced that has been traumatic. A large percent of the population deals with trauma on some level. Recently, we all went through the collective trauma of COVID and the isolation that came along with that. So there are things that we can all relate to within this that will help us relate to others better, will help make our spaces feel more safe for others, help others to thrive, and really ultimately help ourselves as well. So within trauma-informed care, there are what we call the 6 principles of trauma-informed care. They are safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. Sometimes you do see these worded a little differently depending on the source or depending on what, where is referencing these principles. But a lot of the themes are the same, and you'll notice a lot of overlap. So when we talk about safety, not only is that physical safety, but also psychological safety. That's important to recognize that an individual needs to feel safe, not just physically, free from harm, but as a person, that they are psychologically in a safe environment. Trustworthiness and transparency, it's important that an individual feels that they can trust, whether it's their coworkers or their boss, that things aren't being kept from them. Decisions are conducted with transparency and as part of the goal. Peer support is a very important aspect to trauma-informed care. Peer support as well as mutual self-help, because they help establish safety and hope. They can work to build that trust. They can enhance collaboration. Folks can utilize their stories and their lived experience to promote their recovery and their healing from whatever trauma they may have experienced. Also, finding support from peers who also are trauma survivors can be a very important process, part of the process of healing from trauma. The 4th principle, collaboration and mutuality. It's very important to place an emphasis on that collaboration, on partnering, removing what you hear a lot of kind of the differences like power differentials. So whether it's real or perceived differences in power or authority, those differences in those relationships can make, for someone who's experienced trauma, can be very difficult. You think, for instance, maybe a doctor and a patient, there's a very clear difference in the power that those two individuals have. The patient is kind of at the mercy of the doctor, and your sense of individual control can really be taken away in those instances. So for someone who's experienced trauma, that can be very triggering and very difficult. So it's important for us to be aware of that when we're thinking of our relationships with coworkers, with clients, with staff members, et cetera. Empowerment, voice, and choice, working to make sure that individuals feel powered, that we believe in the primacy of the people that we serve, that we believe in resilience, the ability of individuals, organizations, and communities to heal from trauma, to promote recovery from trauma, that individuals in the workforce are empowered to use their voice and make choices that affect them and affect their organization and impact them and others. So we'll obviously dig into more of that today. And cultural, historical, and gender issues. It's important to recognize that there are stereotypes, there are biases, there are inequities relating to a person's gender, their cultural background, their ethnic background, and that often trauma is shared collectively among communities that have been marginalized. And so without recognizing that, it's difficult to move beyond that. It's difficult to remove things that might continue to re-traumatize or re-stigmatize someone. So being aware of that and addressing that cultural and historical trauma is important. So that's just a very brief kind of introduction to trauma-informed care. Obviously, as a practice, it's much larger. There will be more presentations later in this series that will be really informative about trauma-informed care specifically, but I wanted to just give an introduction if it's something that you weren't as familiar with. So let's kind of get into the topic. So exploring collaboration, voice and choice, and social connections. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the principles of trauma-informed care overlap, or one leads to another. It isn't distinct, different kind of sections of a practice, but you'll notice that they really overlap. So a collaborative environment places importance on partnering and leveling power dynamics. This demonstrates that healing happens in relationships and in the meaningful sharing of power and decision-making. Everyone has a role to play in a trauma-informed approach. And I'm sure you've heard the quip before, you don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. So when we're going around, in our everyday lives, we have a role to play with our coworkers, with our family members, with maybe our children, our clients that we serve at work. And really, when it comes down to it, the importance here is on relationship building and being aware of how we are interacting with the individuals around us. We may be one who has a history of trauma ourselves, or we may not, but the people that are around us might. So it's important to be aware of those dynamics. As I mentioned earlier, kind of leveling power dynamics is something that is kind of important to pay attention to. We have a very traditional sort of hierarchy within the workplace that, seems to have been around for as long as time. However, that can really lead to inequities, even within staff of a workplace. And quite often, some people who may be on the lower level of the organization might feel like they have much less ability to make decisions that affect them, that they have less say, that they are just being told what to do and don't have a say in it. And for someone who might have a history with trauma, that can be especially detrimental to that person. So being aware of how that impacts people, being aware that that might be the case is the first step to working to remove those barriers that some people might face, to level those power dynamics. So the ways that we can do that, especially in the workplace or in our everyday life, again, it goes back to relationship building. So we can highlight an individual's strengths and focus on their resiliency. If we know that they have a history of trauma, we don't want to reduce them to just their trauma. We don't, it's not about what's wrong with you type of mentality, but learning what might have happened to a person. And again, in every instance, that might not even be appropriate. So I wouldn't suggest asking that if it's just your coworker. But being aware that folks have diverse backgrounds and, may have experienced some trauma that impacts the way that they move through their life, recognizing that each individual brings important skills, ideas, and beliefs to the table. We can include our staff, our coworkers, our clients in the decision-making process, which can help to give someone a sense of control and direction. And again, many people who have experienced trauma have felt like a lack of control, whether that related directly to the event that led to their trauma, or in the treatment afterward, or in the way that the symptoms of their trauma present itself in their life today. just personally speaking, I am a person who has a history with trauma, and so I relate to a lot of these experiences that I can see in myself in my own day-to-day life. So quite often in traumatic experiences, you really don't have much control over the situation, and your sense of agency has been taken away in some circumstances. So giving people that opportunity to feel like they have a measure of control is very important. So this could look like giving a set of appropriate options to someone and allowing them the ability to choose, working together to come up with a plan or a strategy rather than simply telling someone what they're going to do. Recognize that individuals may have differing ideas, but that they're still all equally valid. Some perspectives may be rooted in differences in someone's background, upbringing, culture, or experiences. Just because an idea or a strategy is different than the one that you might come up with does not mean that it's bad or inappropriate. You can also implement strategies that are aimed at working to reduce the sense of power differentials between leadership and staff, or staff and clients. You can help the staff members work to identify strategies that contribute to feeling comforted and empowered. So you'll notice a theme, and I said it a few times, so much of working to be collaborative, being trauma-informed is thinking about the individual, thinking about the relationship and how we are interacting with them on that personal level. So within those kind of tactics for being collaborative, voice and choice was present, even if it wasn't called out by phrase. So when we say voice and choice, literally encouraging someone to use their voice and have a choice in the simplest of terms. So the term voice and choice refers to empowering individuals to use their voice and make their own choices as a key aspect of trauma-informed approach. Folks who have a lived experience, whether they're members of the leadership, staff, clients, whomever in your organization, they all have a significant involvement, voice, and meaningful choice at all levels of the organizational functioning. So whatever your organization's mission is, whatever it does, it directly impacts people in some way. It utilizes people to complete that mission in a variety of ways. And so all of those people really do have an impact on the organization, and therefore should have some sense of being able to provide their input, making choices, using their voice to determine how that happens. Trauma-informed organizations should work to engage staff members and/or clients at all levels in providing feedback throughout the process of developing, implementing, and evaluating policies and programming, especially those that directly impact them. Now, realistically, this doesn't mean that you're going to be bringing your clients into your policy planning sessions and having them write policies. That's not practical. But what you can do is be open to feedback. Allow clients to know that there is a process for submitting that. Listen to what they're saying, listen to their needs, listen to your staff's needs, directly implement those, and be open to change and make those changes appropriately. So those are ways that you can provide input to people in a workplace, in a client and staff setting that does allow them to use their voice and make people aware that that's an option. So here are some examples of instances where we can give someone a voice, give them a choice. And you'll notice that some of these look similar to when we were talking about collaboration. Like I said, there is a bit of overlap. So we can provide an individual with options and allow the one that works best for them rather than holding a my way or the highway mindset. So if you're a supervisor and you know that a certain task needs done, it might be instinct to just go over to, John Doe and say, do this thing needs done. However, John might have a full schedule of things that he's needing to do. He might have things that he is interested in or isn't interested in. He might also be very resistant to simply being told what to do. And so if he's been in a situation before where he felt like he did not have control, something that was a traumatic event for him, could be a variety of things, that might really lead to him shutting down, might lead to him not being able to accomplish the task effectively. So there's a number of ways why that might not be the best approach. So instead, if you know something needs to be done, rather than just saying, do this, you might take the opportunity to explain what it is that needs done or why it needs done, and help this staff member strategize, come up with options of how to accomplish it. Or you can say, here are these methods, which one do you think will be the most effective? And let someone have a choice to choose a strategy that works best for them, rather than just assigning or micromanaging. Be an active listener, focus on clear and sensitive communication. Ask questions that are open-ended and allow for the individual to give input about when they feel most comfortable, engaged, safe, etc. So again, going back to that relational aspect, actually listening to whether they're your staff, coworkers, clients, getting a sense of when they feel comfortable, when they feel safe, why. It's going to kind of allow them to speak up on maybe some coping mechanisms that they have, or instances where they feel accepted, welcome, whatever it might be. And so if you're aware of those, then it makes those interactions with that person a little bit easier, because if you know that they're very resistant to, maybe someone talks very loudly or something like that, and that might be, reminiscent of a traumatic event, or might be triggering for them, then just to approach them differently. So that can be very useful information, and that has allowed that person's voice to be heard, and for them to make a choice about the world that they exist in. That makes them feel safer. So that's another strategy. You can empower others to advocate for themselves, model self-advocacy, and provide outlets for others to do the same. So again, making people aware that their voice is recognized and that they have a choice to advocate for themselves. Create opportunities for staff, coworkers, and clients to provide input and play a role in organizational decision-making. Avoid punitive correction when mistakes are made, and instead focus on a restorative approach to creating a solution. Again, focus on the relational aspect. So whether it's a client you're working with, whether it's a child, maybe, whether it's your staff, coworkers, whomever it might be, mistakes are going to be made. And rather than just lashing out and correcting them or being punitive, it really is an opportunity to, again, go back to kind of coming up with some strategies for how we could have avoided that mistake, how we could have accomplished whatever the task was, working together to build a solution, to recognize what the problem was, rather than just, again, saying and telling. So there's so much, like I said, overlap, so much collaboration, and just relationship building really at its core. Learn to differentiate between behaviors or practices that are actively harmful to the organization and those that are simply different from how you would do it. Celebrate those differences. So as a supervisor, it's important to know what would actually be something that would be dangerous or harmful to your business practices or illegal or something like that, versus just a strategy to accomplish a task that you might not personally choose, but that might be the best option for your employee. So just because someone else wants to do something differently, that might be more efficient for them. They might understand the process more that way. They might feel ownership over the project because they came up with a way to do it. So really, just because you wouldn't do something that way doesn't mean that it's not an appropriate way to do it, so long as it's not harmful or illegal or otherwise. So there are a lot of ways to promote voice and choice in the workplace and our personal lives. Again, I'm kind of phrasing this more from the perspective of what we might do in the workplace. And I am going to be mindful of time here, so we're going to try to get through these in the next few minutes. Finally, social connection. So this is a quote. This is actually from SAMHSA. Trauma does not occur in a vacuum. Individual trauma occurs in the context of a community, whether defined geographically as in neighborhoods, virtually as in a shared identity, ethnicity, or experience, or organizationally as in a place of work, learning, or worship. Communities that provide a context of understanding and self-determination may facilitate the healing and recovery process for the individual. Alternatively, communities that avoid, overlook, or misunderstand the impact of trauma may often be re-traumatizing and interfere with the healing process. So within the relational aspect of connecting to people, making them feel heard, giving them the opportunity to make choices, to advocate for themselves, to collaborate with one another, Social connection can be a vital aspect of that. Trauma can be very isolating. It can change the way that someone communicates, the way that they read social cues, the way that they interact with people, and that in and of itself can be isolating. The experience can make people feel that no one understands them. So there are a lot of ways that trauma can disconnect people socially. Additionally, someone might have experienced trauma at the hand of a community, so that might pressure them to self-isolate. However, if you remember earlier in the presentation, peer support is a very important aspect of trauma-informed care, and having that connection with your peers, having that connection with others can be a vital aspect of the healing process. So in order to enhance social connection, we can approach interactions simply as they are. They are relationships. So even if you are, just walking up to a coworker, if you're working with a client, you might not think of it that way, but you are building a relationship with that person. So in that instance, we need to make sure that we're placing an emphasis on honesty, trustworthiness, and collaboration. Again, making sure that people feel psychologically safe, that they feel heard, and that they feel that they can provide their input. Work to intentionally build trust. Don't expect to just have it automatically. Only make commitments or promises that we know we can keep, again, to maintain that trust. Understand that trauma can change how an individual reads social cues. Be observant and adjust interactions if necessary. So just because someone's not picking up on your social cues does not mean that they're rude, does not mean that they're avoidant or ignoring you or any of that. That could be a response from the trauma that they experienced, where they simply do not have the ability to read those social cues. So it's important to be aware. If you think back earlier in the first presentation, Tamara had that wonderful image. It was the trauma glasses table. So if you think back to that, we had to put our trauma glasses on and realize that someone's navigating of a social environment might be due to trauma. So we need to act accordingly. Recognize how trauma might change our perception of power and authority. We need to honor existing social structures, even if they appear to be negative from our perspective. And this can be a difficult one because we might perceive that maybe it's a relationship with a significant other, a relationship with their family members, whoever it might be. We might view it as negative, but for that person, that might still be an important social connection, which provides some sense of stability to them. So it's important to understand the role that those connections play, and the potential impacts of restricting them, should we find that necessary. In realizing that making new friends or building new relationships might bring up old feelings of worthlessness or shame for many people. So relationship building might be a difficult activity for some people to even engage in at all. So I kind of feel like I ran through that. It was a little bit brief, but we are at 12:30 here. So if you have any questions, any additional questions or anything, you can feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Corey Stutz, and I am the Community Impact Director at United Way of Licking County. My contact information is on the screen there, so you're welcome to send me an email or connect via phone. I do believe that the recording of this will also be sent out, so if you want to share that, you're welcome to do so, and you can save my contact information from there. So yeah, thank you all. And I think, Peg, are we opening it up for questions?
Yes. So anybody have any questions for Corey? We have kind of scheduled a 15-minute question period.
Okay, I usually have questions, but my goodness, Corey, that was great. I love
thanks,
it.
Katie.
The information, everything on the slides. That was, I can't wait to get copies of it. It was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just have a question. That was great information, and I try to do trauma-informed care committee meetings as much as possible, but things get busy and I can't be at everything. But one of my big, I guess, barriers has been getting everybody to kind of buy in. I was going to kind of give this information to staff. Do you have any other, I mean, what are some good resources I can kind of use as training tools? I feel like you have your hands on resources really well, Corey. Like you do your research well and you know where to go. And yeah, and in trauma informed care committee meetings, a lot of times we talk about this or that, but something that around buy-in, I guess, is what I'm looking for to kind of get my staff to be like, this is important and this is why, and we need to do this.
Yeah. I don't know. So off the top of my head, I'm
Uh-huh.
not sure that I know of anything that specifically is about like a strategy for getting buy-in with your
Employee,
employees.
yeah.
I mean, there are some really great resources like from SAMHSA about trauma-informed care, and I can send
Yeah,
that to you. We have that
that would be
available.
great. I feel like
There are
most
also,
people have experienced trauma, so they understand the importance. Like myself,
I
I'm like,
think,
yes.
yeah,
But if
I
you
think to be
haven't,
honest with you,
or you're
getting
kind of like in denial about it, maybe it's like not as receptive sometimes, I feel.
right, right. And sometimes to get buy-in with your staff literally just comes down to modeling it yourself, um, and being
Joking, I'm
vulnerable
like,
at
what?
times. And, I think because
Well, that's not a
having,
problem, Courtney. No, I'm teasing
well,
you. I'm joking. You're right, though.
having
Yeah.
that personal connection can
Like,
go a long way.
make it
So,
very important to me and be
right,
mindful of like setting that example.
right, right. But I can check with Sylvia too. I mean, there are resources about trauma-informed workplace, um, especially as it's a growing thing. There are a lot of industries, like I said, like originally it was kind of focused on um, clinicians and
Yeah,
mental
I
health
remember
care, but
hearing the ACEs score, like pediatrically. I think we did a big
mhm,
focus on children, schools, pediatricians, like,
yeah,
but now it's like, no, we need to use it everywhere. It's
yeah.
beneficial
And when
everywhere.
you look, there are a lot of research out there is moving away. There was still so much that was geared towards specifically childhood trauma and dealing with children and dealing in a clinical setting, and that's where a lot of stuff is. But folks everywhere are realizing, oh, this is useful in my workplace. This is useful in my day to day. So now, you can find articles about higher education. How do we become trauma informed colleges? How do we become trauma informed hospitals? How do we become trauma informed schools? Um,
Yeah, but being
areas
a
across the
healthcare
board.
provider, I just think it's so important. And we're trying to help sectors of people that have felt stigma in healthcare. So it's like, yeah, this needs to be at the utmost of importance.
Mhm.
And like I said, I have most of my staff is bought in for sure, but there is some people that I don't think feel like they relate to it, but it
Yeah.
still needs to be important. Yes. So thank
And
you.
Peg did also share in the chat,
Yes, I saw that.
pacesconnection.com.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah.
so that was an organization, they kind of went dark back in April, but I just got an email the other day that they raised funds and they're continuing to
Oh,
raise
good.
funds to restart. But they have a whole section in their resources called Becoming Healing Centered Organizations that breaks it down by different types of organizations. So I really encourage you to follow them.
That's
Um,
awesome. Thanks,
and,
Peg.
and but then also to recognize that it's really hard to reach every one of our staff.
This is
And
true. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
If I have the majority, but
yeah,
me being me, I'm like, everybody needs to be on
I get that.
mindful and on the same page. But you're right. I mean, that can be unrealistic at times. Yes.
Yeah.
My life is full of that. It happens.
So, Ashley, I just wanted to chime in. I know at Mental Health America, what we do is we have like a once a month staff meeting, and
Mhm.
Kitty and myself, we do the parenting support. So we like to share our success stories. So, especially with families that are participating, with counselors and even at the Village Network or NIAP or where,
Yeah.
where we're partnering with, and just the success stories, sharing that at a staff meeting so that all of the other people we work with become aware of how effective it is to
That's
incorporate
true.
the trauma informed care. So that's
Yeah.
something we do. We always try to get a success story in there. So that
Not a
helps.
bad idea. Thank you. But yeah, thank you, Corey. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your questions. And thanks, Katie, also for your comments.
Any-
Ashley, this is Deb Grayson. I'm just curious, what's the pushback been?
It's just, I think that they think there's so many other things we're doing that, and everybody has like their passions or their paths with what we're doing, and we are doing a lot of different services. So someone might think that this isn't as important as something else that they're more passionate or focused on. I feel like that's probably the biggest thing. And being a nonprofit that's short-staffed, I do have a ton of people doing a ton of too many things at the same time, probably. Yeah. So it's like, well, that's great. That's important, but this is more important. But really, I'm like, no, this needs to be incorporated in everything. So,
Well, I think you can point out, Ashley, too, the ways that the things that they do, that they are passionate about and that they're already doing could be trauma informed. And
right.
so, talking
Like,
about,
yeah, I think they're kind of missing that mark.
right. It's not like an additional thing necessarily that you're not
Exactly.
doing. It's just a way of realizing, oh, when we are greeting this person by their chosen name, when we are communicating to this person in a way that they like to be communicated to, those are things that your staff is already doing, but those are also trauma-informed practices.
That's true. Maybe I need to be more mindful of the things they're already doing that are already, and not make it such a new, different thing. Or, yeah,
Mhm.
that is true. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily like this is dumb or wasteful of time, or it's just they're doing so much that but you're right, they're probably already doing things that I haven't pointed out that are trauma informed that we're simply already doing. I guess when I try to kind of bring it up, it's kind of like, not, I shouldn't say this again, but it's like, okay, yeah, we're doing this, sure. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it's as important to everyone as I would like it to be, but people show different people show what they're doing in different ways too. Maybe they're already doing it and it's just part of their regular routine, and
Mhm.
me talking about isn't always the best strategy. I can do more education, that like I can send these sessions out virtually or that sort of thing, and make it more independent for them,
Mhm.
instead of me like trying to do a learning session that sounds lecturing, which is a lot
Right.
of what happens clinically. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else with questions for Corey?
Well, it's Katie. I got to add one more thing. The Children's and Families First Council do a phenomenal job with the wraparound team services. So you have like the family, you'll have the school involved, any of the community partners that are working with the family. And so that's also how we get the word out that we are using trauma-informed care with a family, family voice, family choice. So the schools are becoming more aware of it. So Children and Family First Council is phenomenal when they have the wraparound team services. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them. And I have success stories like with the families. So yeah, it does work.
Yeah, Children and Families First Council also just has lots of great resources as well. So, and Sylvia, obviously Sylvia, who's a major part of this committee, is the administrator for CFFC. So she's got all kinds of wonderful stuff if you need more resources or anything like that.
It's just like the epitome of collaboration, with the wraparound
Yeah.
services. So yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? Anybody want to fight me on anything I said?
Oh, you did great. You're always a fact checker.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Because I like I said, I'm one of the presenters amongst a lot of people who are clinicians and therapists and social workers. And so I was feeling a little out of my league. So yeah, thanks for the feedback.
All right. So, I don't have our next session info. Do you have that handy, Corey? Let me see if I can pull it up.
Yes, I did have it pulled up.
Hi, you guys are asking about the next session?
Yes.
November 5th, minimize and emotional safety. Presenter Ronnie Boyer, whoever that is.
So Ronnie, we lost you.
What do you mean?
We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So it's November 5th,
Okay.
everybody.
So next session, November 5th, again at noon with 30 minutes for the presentation and a 15-minute Q&A. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Corey. Very, very strong, fabulous presentation with great information. There will be, when you exit this meeting, the opportunity to complete an evaluation. Please do that. It's really helpful to us as we think about how this has worked and we plan to move forward. And if you put your name in, it will also give you the opportunity to have a certificate of attendance. Thanks, folks. Take care. Have a good week.
Thank you.